In 1977, Dario Argento made the surrealist masterpiece Suspiria. It is one of his many amazing films in his lengthy filmography before he fell off the deep end in the early 2000s. Despite this, Suspiria is his most well known film, even to casual horror fans. Well, whether it was at the time or decided with the film we're talking about today, Suspiria was the first in a trilogy of movies centered on the three mothers, and the second film is Inferno. Despite having little to do with Suspiria, I thought it would be interesting to do a film that is more so a spiritual successor and takes place in the same universe rather than a straight up sequel, although the first film's events are mentioned during passing. However, it became a different story once I watched it. When I went into Inferno, I really didn't want to think of it as another Suspiria, but a different film entirely with similar atmosphere. However, once I kept watching, I always had this tingling on the back of my neck like, you could be watching something similar, but a lot fucking better. Inferno was a huge disappointment for me. I really wanted to like it, but I think it failed to grasp what made Suspiria so good in the first place. It had a simplistic story, yet it was dripping in nightmarish atmosphere. Here, I think Argento tried to do a more complex narrative, but failed miserably. With this, the nightmarish quality didn't work as well as it should have, so the movie falls flat on both fronts. I feel like there's so much story with this film that I think Argento was trying to make it more complex, but none of the story is really used in the film. While the film does start off promising, it gets worse and worse and is an absolute slog to get through. None of that disturbing atmosphere worked for me personally, unfortunately. I also didn't like the choice of protagonist. It goes through three different protagonists before Act 1 is finished, but we end up with the blandest of the three. Rose and Sarah were much more interesting with their small amount of screen time than Mark was. I honestly didn't even remember the guy's name until the credits started to roll. Mark was an incredibly uninteresting character, and it was a shame that we were stuck with him for the majority of the running time. However, I would just like to state that I don't 100% totally hate this movie. The music by keyboardist Keith Emerson is absolutely fucking amazing. I still prefer the score by Goblin in the first film, but Emerson's score is still fantastic. As I said, the beginning was rather good. It was a bit slow moving, but it did intrigue me with a lot of the lore of the Three Mothers and how Rose is trying to figure it out. There was also the scene with the shopkeeper trying to drown the cats. Somehow the scene disturbed me because of how slow and fucked up it was. It really stood out to me. There were a couple highlights here and there. However, for the most part, I found Inferno to not nearly be as interesting as the first film. The atmosphere is non existent, and the fact that Argento is trying to have a more complex narrative but failing miserably, as well as the fact that the ending is laughably bad. I recommend just watching the first film or any of the other amazing films in Argento's filmography.